For those of you who think that the age of miracles is past, I am losing my voice. It's been coming and going all week, and it may be that you'll get a slightly shorter sermon if it completely goes. Who needs friends? Anyway, over the last few weeks, Michael's been doing an interview series on different concerns. We've had worry, and we've had grace, and lots of other different things. Driving cars, which is Mark's favourite thing. I think he's told me about it every day since last week, which is good. But this morning we're moving on, and we're starting a series on the Old Testament. So this morning is the first one, and the title, it has two titles. The first title is Labels. The second title is Let God See Who You Really Are, so you can see who He really is. So we'll take those two titles and see which one you think fits at the end. This has really come because I've been thinking a lot about labels over the last few weeks. For the ones of you that have known that I've been going into Carnforth High School doing this work, obviously I can't really talk about that work, it's confidential, but one of the big things that I've been trying to overcome in the young people's lives is labels. If somebody says you are something, you are something. Doesn't matter if there's evidence to show that in a different way, it's true. Even as bad as if somebody says you deserved to be abused, it's true. If somebody says you should end your life, it's true. If someone says you're fat, it's true. Doesn't matter what it is, it's true. And what I've been trying to talk to these young people about is you are you. You are a unique being. You are who you are, and you can decide who you want to be. You don't have to stick to a label. So slowly, that's been going in. And so it just gave me a bit of a theme about what labels that we put on people. So a lot of it is the label you get is what you're known for. So let's just have a little bit of a quiz. A lot of these are ridiculously easy, but normally when I make a quiz, everyone moans it's too hard. So what is Beyonce famous for?
Hardly being dressed.
Hardly being dressed. Her bottom. I obviously have a bit of a cleaner mind. I was thinking about singing, but yes, she is famous for her bottom and hardly being dressed. What's John Grisham famous for?
Good
Books. Good writing. Crime writing. This is a difficult one. What's Kim Kardashian famous for? Instagram, being married to Kanye West. Her dad was the solicitor in the O.J. Simpson trial, or the lawyer, if we're going to be American. I think that's how she... Prince William, what's he famous for? Being Prince William. That's pretty hardcore, really, isn't it? What about Alexander Fleming?
Penicillin.
Yeah, he invented penicillin. What about, Michael's going to have to help me with the pronunciation, Dominic Thiem. Is that the right team? Dominic Thiem. Tennis, yes. Dominic Thiem knocked Federer out yesterday in the Mercedes Cup in Stuttgart, just to get my tennis geek head on. He did actually beat him a month ago in the Italian Open, and that was on clay. And Federer basically said it doesn't matter because no one ever listens to the results of the Italian Open. So this guy's got his own back and beat him again. That's enough of... No one ever wants to listen about tennis, so I never speak about it.
I do.
You do, yeah. You two do, but you know, not everybody really gets it. Anyway, what about... What did you say?
It's all right, it's a person.
Victor Dorman, what's he famous for? Victor Dorman. Right, well, let me... do you know Heather?
No.
You always know. Right, Victor Dorman, let me read you his obituary. Victor Dorman, who helped change the way Americans buy cheese by putting the paper between the slices. As chairman of the Dorman Cheese Company, he died on March the 4th at his home in Delray Beach, and he was 80. Why is Victor Dorman important and what his label was? Let me tell you why. He did change the way Americans buy cheese by slicing it and putting paper in between the slices. It was his parents' company, and he decided that when he went to work for his parents' company, nearly after he'd retired, nearly when he was at that age, that it was a more sensible idea than the cheese just being sold and getting stuck together. It's not rocket science, but he was very famous for it. But actually, Victor Dorman was a massive philanthropist and did a lot of work for charity. He also was a decorated naval officer and had a significant role in World War II. But what he was remembered for is putting the paper between the slices of the cheese. And it just goes to show how sometimes we remember people for different things. And it gives the question, what do you want to be known for? Or a better question, what were you born to do? What were you born to do? Erwin McManus says that we're all hypocrites in transition. I'm not who I want to be, but I am on the journey there, and thankfully I'm not whom I used to be. Faith is all about uniqueness, isn't it? Your faith is different to mine, there is similarities to it, but faith is all about uniqueness. It's about what Jesus is doing in our lives, and in different times that will be a different thing. But your faith, your story, is not about what God's doing here, not about what God's doing there. It's about what God's doing now in your life. Michael talked last week about driving and moving forward. And I listened to it online because I was in the kids' work. And the thing, it wasn't the only thing that stuck out to me, but something that did make me chuckle, because it's like me, is he talked about a lady who was driving, and instead of concentrating on what she was doing, she was looking on the rainbow patterns on the windows and thinking what nice colours they made. This is just me. And a little after I'd listened to that message, I was reading a book, and it was basically, you what?
Whilst driving.
No. If I could find out how to read a book whilst driving, I would do it. But anyway, I was reading this book, and the lady, she was an architect, and somebody was trying to get her to rest. And they were saying, go and look in this field of sunflowers and tell me what you see. And she went to look in this field of sunflowers, and she was like, okay, it's a field of sunflowers. What is it? And what he wanted her to see were that along the field of these sunflowers were lots of little tiny white flowers that nobody ever looked at because they were on the floor. There were lots and lots of beautiful little white flowers that made beautiful patterns on the floor. But nobody ever saw them because they were looking at the sunflowers. And also, if she'd have looked at those white flowers forever, she'd have never gone back and been the best architect in the passive housing market. She's a very famous architect who is famous for passive housing and saving energy. She'd have never done that. And the point is that we have to have life in balance. We can't spend all the time looking at the white flowers. We can't spend all the time looking at the sunflowers. And we can't spend all the time being an architect. Because God takes us on a different journey. But whatever that journey is, we need to see what we were born to do. And, you know, sometimes we spend too much time looking at the white flowers instead of doing what we're supposed to be doing. Sometimes it's called procrastinating. Sometimes we spend too much time looking at the sunflowers. Let's just all do all the good things and not really think about the other things. And sometimes we spend too much time striving, doing the work, not resting. And in between that, God needs to be allowed to move into that journey. So it's all about balance. Erwin McManus again says that the thing about Christianity is that you've got this eternal balance between I'm a sinner and there's nothing good in me, and I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. There's these two different balances, and we need to find who we are in God, not who somebody else is, not what somebody else does for God, but what you do. don't come here and there and do things because you think you need to do them or because other people think you need to do them, but where does God want you to be? And that servant heart is what we're looking at. And today we're going to look at the servant heart in the story of Moses. Obviously, every time we talk about the New Testament, I always want to talk about Joseph, because he is the greatest character in the Bible, I think, apart from Jesus, maybe not. But today I want to talk about Moses. So, Jacob and his family, all 70 members of them, have settled in the Goshen area of Egypt. It's about 1876 BC, and Moses was born about 350 years later. In the interim years, the Israelites becoming so numerous that Goshen was filled with them. And a new Pharaoh came to power who did not know the history of Joseph helping Egypt, and he felt threatened by all these people. So he ordered the Hebrew midwives to kill Israelite newborn males. The midwives worked around Pharaoh's edict, and the number of Israelites continued to grow. Still determined to reduce the number of Israelites, Pharaoh ordered that every Israelite male must be thrown into the Nile, where the infant would die. So that's where we are. We're in Deuteronomy. No, we're not. We're in Exodus 2, and that's where we're going. So Moses has been born. Well, he's about to be in about the next verse. So, Exodus 2, I don't know why I keep saying Deuteronomy. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." Often the story of Moses in the bulrushes is one that we reserve for Sunday school, and we colour in nice little pictures. Or there's that very cheesy, which I just couldn't bring myself to play, that very cheesy Hollywood movie of this glamorous woman with like sort of this glamorous music, and she's got this little baby and he's gurgling as she pushes him down the river, and there's all like romantic music, and I couldn't bring myself to play that either. But what is it that's important about this story, about understanding who we are? And what I think it is this. These family issues were so great that it was safer to drop him in the Nile and give him back to the enemy than it was to keep him. Pharaoh's daughter knew who he was. She knew that he was a Hebrew baby, but she still accepted him. And it's easy when we're looking at labels to make assumptions about people, isn't it? They are that. That person is that. What kind of choice do people have to make when it's safer to send their son in a basket sailing towards the enemy than it is to keep them? Often people make judgments, don't they, especially about people who are refugees, and why are they leaving their houses? They just want to come and take all our money. But what kind of life is it when it's easier to run away to the enemy than it is, or the unknown, or the risk, than to live where you are? And often people have come from places that we would never understand. And so when we're thinking about labels, it's difficult if we're looking in a place of judgment. One thing that God does is, he doesn't judge us with a label. He doesn't say that person is that that person is this. He loves them. And so sometimes it's about where we are and how our life has been, but now it's about where he's going. So Moses is going down the river to the enemy because his mother thinks it's safer for him. Somebody said this about refugees. You know, those of us who leave our homes in the morning and expect to find them there when we go back, it's hard for us to understand what the experience of a refugee might be like. And that's what Moses' life started as, a refugee. He was born into one family, it wasn't safe for him to stay, and so he left. So God didn't write him off with a label. There's still a story to come. The person who picks him up is the one who tried to kill him. And the plot twists even further because Moses becomes part of Pharaoh's family and the Pharaoh educates him. So God already changes that judgment and that label. This man is born to die, and all of a sudden God's changed the story. Don't underestimate the twists and turns of the story. Just like John Grisham, I've only read one John Grisham book. Tracy and Michael are rather more educated in it. But there's always a twist and a turn in those kind of stories. And that's what God does. The label that you have isn't the one that you're stuck with. God can always change the story. And Moses lived for 40 years with Pharaoh. And, you know, he might have been really happy. He might not have realised that the danger he was in. He might not have realised that he was not really an Egyptian boy. I don't know. But he lived for 40 years. And then he suddenly saw an Egyptian treating an Israelite very, very badly. And something stirred in him. And he killed that man. Something stirred in him, whether it was about his heritage, whether it was something that just impassioned him. But he saw that that was wrong and he killed him and he had to run away. So again, he's running into the unknown and he's not really sure what he's going to find. God doesn't need people to be heroes. God makes people courageous. I'm not saying that you should go and kill people because that's not what I'm advocating. But God doesn't need heroes. He doesn't create people that are super strength and have all the answers. God makes people courageous when he needs them to. Just like Captain America. There are lots of people who are sick of being less. There's lots of people that are dissatisfied and just sick of being less and not becoming who they were born to be. 80 years of living as someone he wasn't created to be, Moses had. 40 years in Egypt and 40 years as a son of Midian. That's how he was born. But how you're born is not the whole story. The label that you have when you're born is not how you carry on. Shane Claiborne said, all around you people will be tiptoeing through life just to arrive at death safely. But dear children, do not tiptoe. Run, hop, skip or dance. Just don't tiptoe. What we can learn about Moses is that people move on. He was started off in a family that loved him, but he couldn't stay there. He was sent to the enemy, and that was dangerous, but actually it worked out all right for him. Then he made a mistake, he killed somebody, and he had to run away again. But God didn't give up on him. At 80, he still had a job to do. And often we label ourselves to do with our past. We write ourselves off. We decide that we're too old, or we've been through too much, or we've seen too much, or we're not the right kind of person. God doesn't make superheroes. God makes the right people courageous at the right times. When you decide to move on, you will. When you make that decision to shift that label and you decide to move on, you will. Because ultimately God loves people and he loves you. And he loves you more than you could ever possibly imagine. And he loves you more than putting a label on you. and finishing you off and saying, he's just that now. That's never the case. Moses had to run away from the Egyptian culture he had grown up in and ended up saving the people and destroying the Egyptian army. What a story. A boy who was born as an Israelite was sailed down the river in a little basket and became an Egyptian. He was born an Egyptian, brought up as an Egyptian. He was nursed by the Pharaoh's daughter. He was brought up and educated by the Pharaoh. Then he saw that something wasn't right, and it stirred him, and he had to run away from that culture and the safety that he presumably had. I'm sure he was well cared for as part of the Egyptian royal family. But he still came back, and he went against his culture almost to save people because God empowered him to do it. If you look at that in broad terms, God had an amazing story in that man, and none of it would have worked if he'd have had a label. He was destined to death as a baby. He was an Egyptian. He was an Israelite. He was a murderer. What was he? He was God's servant. And that's what I'd like to look at today, that he did not have a label that defined him. Sometimes we label ourselves and it's like we've given in. This is what's happened. This is it now. I'm too tired. I'm too fed up. I'm too disillusioned. I'm too old. I'm too this. And God brings people into the right place at the right time, and he makes them courageous. And the answer is, the only label that you need is that you are a servant of God. Because when you show God who you really are and strip away the labels, he will show you who he really is. Let's just watch this quick video. So my question this morning is, who would you be if the world did not give you a label? Don't let labels block your potential, minimize you. What will be the ending for your story? Sometimes it's about changing the question. When I'd been a Christian about a year, I still saw myself as quite a new Christian. And somebody asked me to speak in church, and I said, well, I'm quite a new Christian, so I don't really feel qualified. And they said, instead of saying you're a new Christian, why don't you get on with being a Christian? Stop labelling yourself. We often give people labels, we give ourselves labels, and we minimise our potential. Moses was 80 when he was given the task of parting the Red Sea. That was no big ask. You know, go to the people who brought you up and fight against them and let the people go. You know, that was a big task. And we'll probably go into that again over the next few weeks. But the church needs us to bring the solution. As a church, we need to be the solution. Often as Christians, we bring the problems. This is wrong. This is not right. I don't like this. I judge that. God wants us to bring solutions to those problems. The solutions are this. Here I am. Come and use me. I'm not defined by anything except who you are in me. There's an actor who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. He is a Christian man, and if he talks about that film, it's a very moving. Who you really are is not how you see yourself, but how God sees you. This is what happens when we don't live in limitations with labels. Moses didn't have labels anymore because God still used him at 80, and he did an amazing thing. And we're just going to watch what he did very quickly as we close. But my message this morning that I believe God has given to me is, don't limit yourself with labels. When you show God who you really are, he'll show you who he really is. And that can make amazing changes, miracles, move mountains, and part the Red Sea. We give ourselves that limit us, we will think about some of the labels other people give us that limit us, and that we would draw close to who you are. You're not looking for heroes, you're not looking for perfect people. You will see the potential in everybody, and you will do with each person the right thing to draw them towards the task that you have for them, whether they're 8 or 18 or 80. You have an amazing purpose and plan for each one of us, and I pray each one here would see that plan. I pray for those who are not here today because they're ill or they're doing other things, and I pray that you would draw close to them too. Lord, I pray that ultimately we wouldn't be a church of labels or defined by anything but who you are in us. And I pray that as we run this place, that everybody who comes here would be stripped of their label and just be seen for the potential that they have in you, which is unending and limitless.